Aloha, and welcome back to another special episode of Talk Story with House Majority. My name is Della Albalati, and I serve as the House Majority Leader for the Hawaii State Legislature. A lot has happened since our last episode in June when we completed the end of the 2021 school year and all the wonderful accomplishments of students from across our state doing incredible things despite the COVID-19 pandemic. Since that time, the House and Senate went into special session in July to address Governor David Ige's objections to 3 bills and override 5 of the governor's vetoes. Since that time, the spread of the Delta variant has resulted in new restrictions imposed. We see social gathering restrictions with a minimum of 10 people indoors, no more than 25 people outdoors, and restrictions on patrons in restaurants, bars, and social establishments, such that they must remain seated while maintaining at least 6 feet distancing between groups and have been restricted to 50% capacity. We have also seen the start of the new school year. Over 170,000 public school students have returned to school in the first week of August. There were limited distance learning options available to public school students with a focus on getting students back to in-person and on-campus learning. This special episode will look at all of those developments, but we'd like to first jump in with the lifting of the statewide eviction moratorium and the new process now set in motion with the passage of Act 57, House Bill 1376, to help renters navigate through these troubling times with mediation and rental assistance. Joining me today is Representative Troy Hashimoto of District 8 on Maui, who serves as the Vice Chair of the House Committee on Housing and is one of the lead legislators on the crafting of House Bill 1376. Troy, let's jump right in. There was a bit of confusion on August 5th as the nationwide eviction moratorium was set to expire. So what is the current status between the CDC and the state eviction moratorium?
Well, thanks so much, Majority Leader, for having me. And I think this is a great educational opportunity because there is a lot of confusion out there between Act 57 and the new Center for Disease Control eviction moratorium. And so, as you said, the governor allowed on August 6th the eviction moratorium, the statewide eviction moratorium, which was broad. It applied to everyone statewide since the beginning of the pandemic back in April of 2020 to expire. And that essentially means that we were going to go into what we call Act 57 provisions, which we passed this past legislative session, where you would have to go through mandatory mediation before filing any type of eviction notice with any of your any landlord filing with their tenants and to the courts and to the mediation centers. And so we had quite a good process set out because it was going to address those who are 4+ months rent behind, who would then be able to go to the court process. So there was a lot of time. We wouldn't get to those 1 month and below in rent until January. So there was a lot of time built in to allow people to get back to some type of normalcy. But since that time, just around the state eviction moratorium was about to expire, the Center for Disease Control President Biden announced that there was going to be a CDC moratorium. And we didn't ever have to worry about this before because it never applied to us because we had a very broad statewide eviction moratorium. But now that our statewide moratorium ended, the CDC moratorium does apply to us. So there are criteria that if you make a certain amount of money, that's $99,000 or $1,000 or less as a single filer, or $198,000 as a joint filer, you do qualify for the CDC moratorium. But in this case, you have to be proactive. It doesn't automatically apply to you. You have to go online, find that CDC self-certification filing, fill it out, make sure you qualify, and you send it, if you're a tenant, you have to send it to your landlord. And that will protect you for a certain period of time. Mm-hmm. The current moratorium goes until October 3rd. It could be extended, we're not sure. But it also means that to qualify, we have to be in a high spread environment of COVID-19, and that could end at any time as well. So there is a lot of influx moments that you may have, but I think the best advice is to be proactive and start making sure that you have a plan, because at any time the CDC eviction moratorium will end. But rest assured, there is also Act 57 in place that requires the mediation. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about mediation today and the timing that you can get into mediation, but that is a very powerful tool that you can utilize to find some type of agreement between your landlord and tenant.
So, you talked about Act 57, for our viewers, House Bill 1376 was something that was actually, you've been working on it for a year, like you said. So can you tell me the story a little bit more behind the drafting of House Bill 1376?
Yeah, so when we started the drafting of this bill, it was, we really knew that at some point the eviction moratorium, the statewide eviction moratorium was going to end. And we knew at that point we needed to have some type of transition. We wanted to have some type of soft landing for tenants, because we knew we couldn't just cut off an eviction moratorium and expect everyone in the community would be fine. So we wanted to make sure that we had provisions in place that would allow some time for people to get back to some normalcy. And I think the goal is to get back to normal, but we knew we couldn't do that immediately. And so I think what we decided, Chair Nakamura of the Housing Committee and myself brought together a diverse group of individuals who are experts in that area. I think here in the legislature, we need to hear from various experts to craft a really good piece of legislation. So we had people from legal aid, we had landlord attorneys, we had the judiciary, we had Hawaii Appleseed, we had a retired judge on there. Of course, the Mediation Center of the Pacific was there, all giving their input of what would a soft landing look like. And so I think one of the biggest things that came out of that working group was be sure to keep it simple as possible, because throughout these times, landlord-tenant code is just very confusing. And so we wanted to try and simplify it as best as we can. And so we used the process of the courts having to require mediation anyway. So if you file some type of eviction notice previously to the eviction moratorium, you could go to the courts and they would say, okay, you go through this mandatory mediation that we're going to order you to go through. So our thought was, why wait until you get to the court? Why not do it as a proactive measure, and maybe you can get some type of agreement before seeing a judge. And that's the basis of Act 57, is making sure that that mediation gets done before seeing a judge, going in front of that judge, to make sure that we can help the judiciary in terms of their load, because we know they're going to be overwhelmed, and also to help the mediation centers to take care of a large load as well. We don't want to overwhelm the mediation centers as well. So we tried to make sure that there was some tiering in place to try and make sure that there was a plan of who do we take care of first. And those are the 4+ months behind rent that we want to address first.
So I really wanted to tease out this fact that you brought together key stakeholders, because really, this problem is not just about tenants, but it's also about landlords who have to deal with mortgages. And then it's about the judiciary that has to maintain this. And then it's about the public good and our interest in ensuring that people are safe and have homes, correct? So really, it was a collaborative process. You want to speak anything more to that before we bring over Tracey?
Yeah, no, I think it's a lot of them bring diverse opinions. I think everyone is trying to advocate for their special interest. But I have to give this group a lot of credit, because I think everyone gave up a little bit for what they really wanted in seek of a common good. And that was to make sure this transition period was successful for all. And I think it's a really good symbol of that collaboration in legislation still can happen. And I think it's a model of how we try and collaborate in the future. But I think there was a big sense of urgency that we needed to figure out a solution, because we all knew this day was coming and it's here. And we're just going to hope for the best that a lot of the things that we thought of will be enough to contemplate this transition moving forward.
Sure. Now, I know, did you hit on the main highlights and the key points and features of House Bill 1376, or was there anything else you wanted to add before we bring on Tracey?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nuances in the notice that a landlord has to give to a tenant. There is forms available. You have 15 days to notice you're a landlord to a tenant for mediation, and then they have another 15 days to complete the mediation. And so there is a form, handy form on repnakamura.com, and so we were able to work with these stakeholders to put these forms up onto Rep Nakamura's website. So repnakamura.com will have all of those forms for each of the islands. So be sure to check that out.
Before we leave, so each of the islands, that's another complicated piece of this, right? So we have House Bill 1376, Act 57 operating on all islands, but we really had, there was a real county component of it. Can you speak to a little bit of that?
Yeah, so each of the counties are operating a little differently because they all have the mediation piece run by the local mediation center. And so we had to work with each county to set that mediation center up. So each mediation center, depending on where you live, will be a little bit different. And so that's why each of the forms are a little bit different, because each of the mediation centers have a different contact information, slightly different procedures, but for the most part, I think they all should be statewide, should have the same type of framework that they're working off of. But we want to make sure that you're getting in touch with the right people and getting those appointments done, because that is the most critical thing, is to start talking now rather than waiting.
So this is a really good time for us to introduce our next guest, Tracey Wiltgen of Mediation Center of the Pacific. Tracey, you have been critical in this piece, and you were part of the stakeholder group that Rep. Hashimoto put together. Throughout the pandemic, what were some of the stories you were hearing about the challenges facing tenants and the challenges facing landlords?
So, and as you say, there were challenges facing both. Tenants were afraid. They didn't want to talk to their landlords because they didn't know what to say to them if they didn't have funding to pay the landlord. Some were trying to take money out of their savings or borrow to at least pay part of the rent, but they were just very scared and not knowing, how to move forward. And of course, landlords were frustrated. They need to have money to be able to pay for their bills and maintain the property. But we've also heard a lot of good stories where landlords were trying to reach out and work with tenants, and sometimes it's just the fear of everything going on would prevent communication. So definitely a lot of need on both sides, a lot of frustration, and a desire to be able to somehow work together to restore payments to landlords and to be able to ideally keep tenants in their housing.
So, one of the concerns as we were developing this legislation was going to be the crush on the court system. What have been some of the immediate after effects of both this federal and the state moratorium being lifted, and then the CDC reinstating a partial moratorium? What did you see happen on Oahu?
So we anticipated originally, when the state moratorium ended, to receive at least 1,000 to 1,500 notices really quickly. And with the CDC moratorium in place, then there was a lot of confusion, as Representative Hashimoto has stated. We have still received notices. Right now we've received about 250 notices from landlords who also provided the notices to their tenants. And we have reached out to the tenants. And we actually have scheduled about 56 mediations to date. Some of the mediations have been conducted. And interestingly, a lot of the landlords who filed the notices, they also provided to the tenants a copy of the CDC declaration. So gave the tenant the opportunity to complete it and fill it out and provide it back to the landlord if they met the requirements. So there are a lot of landlords and tenants attempting to work together. The other piece of it is what we're hearing is a lot of landlords and tenants that we are working with right now haven't accessed the rental assistance program, and certainly that is a big area of emphasis. I mean, if the tenant qualifies and the tenant and landlord work together to submit the necessary documents, then the landlord will recoup their back rent owed, which will enable the tenant to stay, and also the tenant could be eligible for rent moving forward. So it's really critical that they have these conversations and develop working relationships to apply for the rental assistance.
So one of the things I'm hearing from what you're saying is that mediation actually provides a bridge to rental assistance, because people may not have understood that they could access it, and that it also helps the counties to spend down all of this federal monies that we have available for rental assistance. Is that a correct way to explain it?
Absolutely. We've talked to, and because there's everybody's been stressed out, needless to say, by the last 18 months, and And sometimes landlords are trying to reach out to tenants, and tenants aren't responsive because they're embarrassed, they're fearful. Maybe they're not aware of the rental assistance program. In some instances, the tenant's trying to be proactive and the landlord isn't being responsive. And so through mediation, we're helping them engage in conversations about the fact that there is still a lot of rental assistance. There was some confusion there. Some thought, well, the portal opened and it closed, so I lost my chance. So by going through these discussions, they're learning there is the opportunity. They're hearing that both are motivated. In some instances, there is a lot of distrust, and through the mediation process, they're hearing that both are motivated to apply for rental assistance. And absolutely, so it's crafting a bridge that they work together to apply. And we've had quite a few, actually, landlords and tenants agree to fill out the documents together, work towards that, and then meet again or talk again in a couple months after hopefully they've been approved and they receive the rental assistance.
So the process of mediation is really a very structured conversation, and it's not something that you just go in and kind of like try to figure out what you're doing and try to negotiate. It's really something that takes skilled mediators. What did the Mediation Center have to do to prepare for this process to unfold in the numbers that we thought it was going to unfold? Luckily, it didn't have to happen in the numbers, but the moratorium, the CDC moratorium, will lift at some point as well.
Yes.
So what did the Mediation Center have to do to get ready for this process?
Yeah. So all of the mediation centers across the state worked really hard to set up an infrastructure to be prepared for a large volume of cases. The Mediation Center of the Pacific has recruited 4 full-time staff to handle all the intake and the scheduling. We also recruited 15 independent contractor mediators who are available to mediate 5 to 6 days a week, 4 to 6 cases a day. And that was the only way we could make sure that we were efficiently scheduling cases quickly and getting them mediated, because as you heard, there's a 15-day timeline for the tenant to schedule the mediation, and then ideally within the next 15 days the case is mediated. We've even heard so far some landlords said, well, I can't believe how quickly you scheduled it. So that the system seems to be working. What we've also done is set up a secure portal on our website to make it easy for landlords, so rather than calling or mailing or faxing the notices, they go directly to our website. There's a link, they input some information, they upload the notice, and they immediately get a confirmation that we've received the notice, which is part of the requirement. And then that enables our staff to immediately take the information, reach out to the tenant, and start scheduling the mediation process. So we have really tried to streamline the mediation process and the scheduling to enable tenants and landlords to get into mediation. And then predominantly, well, and actually right now with the higher COVID numbers, all of them are being conducted remotely via Zoom. And what we have done, though, to make mediation accessible for those who might not have the appropriate equipment or bandwidth or maybe comfort level, they can come to our office. We're located on Young Street, and we have 3 large private mediation rooms with equipment, so they can be in a room. So a landlord or a tenant without the equipment can be in a room by themselves using our equipment with support from our staff. We've also reached out to different organizations in the various communities to see if they'd be willing to make their office available for tenants or landlords who also need to use the equipment. So that's also another opportunity to make it easily accessible. Hopefully when the numbers go down for individuals who just aren't comfortable with remote, we can have limited face-to-face again.
So we've talked about and thrown this word around in mediation. What exactly for our viewers is mediation? What are the steps in mediation that's going to help them navigate this process?
That's a great question, because I think most people, unless you've been through the process, don't understand how mediation works. First and foremost, it's a very informal process. So typically the mediator and the parties, so landlord and tenant, would meet together. And the mediator would get a sense from each, where they're at currently regarding rent and payment of rent. And then the mediator will meet with them in private sessions. And this is part of the power of the process. If there's discomfort or they want to say things that they don't want the other person to hear. And the mediator's job is twofold. It's to listen and help them start talking to each other in a way they haven't been able to by going back and forth between them in these private sessions, and also to help them negotiate customized agreement. Important that mediation is confidential, and by that I mean, so as a mediator, I don't go out and talk about what I've heard. If it ends up in court, any offers that they made or potential settlements that they came close to but then didn't happen can't be used against them later in court. So that's an important piece. So prior to the mediation that's scheduled, the landlord and tenant are given a confidentiality agreement to sign. It's all electronic signature. And the mediator will go over this again. But it's really a process that it's more about talking and putting things on the table and having that mediator help convey messages that are hard to convey and help them look at their situation and come up with agreements. If they're able to reach an agreement, the mediator will memorialize it for them, and again, they'll sign off on it, so they each have a signed copy of what they agreed to. And if somebody needs an interpreter, the Mediation Center of the Pacific or all the mediation centers will provide interpreters, so there's no cost to either landlord or tenant, whether for the interpreter or for the process itself. So it's really a way of helping them talk, look at their situation realistically, and come up with solutions that work for them. Because that's the other key, is the mediators aren't going to tell them what to do, and they're not going to make a decision for them. Mm-hmm. But they're going to help them have a conversation and negotiate agreements that work for them.
So I know my next question for you is what resources are available for tenants and landlords, but I'm going to try and see if we're able to bring on Thelma, Akita-Kealoha from our Maui. Hi, Thelma. Thank you so much for joining us. So Tracey is located primarily here on Oahu, but we do, like as we mentioned earlier in our conversation with Representative Hashimoto, we actually have mediation centers available at all of the other counties, and we're working closely with city and county individuals who are helping us do this. Rep. Hashimoto, can you introduce Thelma for us?
Yeah, so Thelma is in charge of Catholic Charities on Maui, and Catholic Charities is one of the primary groups that is coordinating the rental relief for Maui County, and I think that is one of the biggest components of all of this, is trying to make sure that we can get rental relief delivered to all who need it, and that is primarily if you're 80% AMI or below, and you will qualify for rental relief. And so Thelma will at least be able to tell us how it's been going, at least on Maui, and maybe that's representative of how it's going on other islands, of how rental relief is being delivered, because I think that's truly important.
Thelma, let's chime in if you can. What does Catholic Charities do on Maui, and what are some of the key programs for Catholic Charities on Maui? How's it going over there? I believe you might be in mute. So let's go to Tracey. I'm so sorry. We'll work that out. But Tracey, so what are some of the resources for landlords and tenants?
Well, definitely rental assistance, and that's a key one. It's also important, we tell landlords and tenants to prepare for mediation. Landlords should talk to an attorney. We encourage tenants to reach out to legal aid, and they have a lot of great information. Legal aid actually has information on their website, both for attorneys and tenants, but they can also talk with tenants. The other important resource for tenants to reach out to is for financial counseling, to get a sense of, where are they at realistically, and in the future when rental assistance isn't available, what's that going to look like for them, so that they can plan realistically. And I encourage tenants, the more you can reach out to legal aid and financial counseling and rental assistance or even if you recognize that eventually you're not going to be able to afford that unit or that residence, to check with other resources regarding other places to live, so that when you come into a mediation, you can come in with some concrete information. So, for example, I applied for rental assistance and I probably won't know for 2 months. So then they could craft an agreement for a certain period of time and then recheck in. Or I'm looking into alternate housing, but it won't be available for 4 months, and then maybe work on a payment plan. So the more information and reaching out to these various resources that are available, the better for tenant and landlord. So that's important.
Okay, we're going to try again to go to Thelma on Maui. And I'm going to ask kind of a little staff just to stay right there and let me know that it's coming through. Thelma, are you there again?
I am here.
Oh, yay!
I'm here.
So Thelma, we've learned from Tracey a lot about what the mediation centers do, but I want to give you an opportunity. What does Catholic Charities do in Maui? What are some of the key programs that you folks have?
We have several financial assistance programs. The largest being the MIRA program, which is the emergency rental assistance. Still cannot hear.
No, we can hear you. You're doing fine, Thelma. So what kind of stories are you hearing on the ground on Maui?
What are we hearing? Concerns for tenants, worried about being evicted, worried, earlier people were so nervous that they were borrowing money, emptying out their accounts. They were trying to make sure that their rent was paid, and they left other bills to the wayside because they were so concerned about being evicted. So, there is a concern for eviction. Even though they're getting help now, they're still always concerned. And then rents are seemingly to spike now. So even more so, I think they're fearful of being evicted, because if they're having difficulty now getting rent, or paying their rent, when the rent is higher, how much more difficult is that going to be? And also, I think people don't understand how they qualify for this assistance. We're just encouraging people to call. If they're not sure, call. That's the big thing.
So we'll be sharing with our audience the contact information for all the mediation centers. But Thelma, if you're still there,
yes.
Do you know what the status of the rental assistance available on Maui is? Is it something that you are able to connect people who call Catholic Charities Maui? Are you being successful in connecting people with both the mediation services as well as the rental assistance programs?
Yes, of course. We want people to mediate. We want to encourage them to utilize the resources that are in the community. So definitely we do refer to the mediation. We have spent over $8 million. We have provided assistance to Lanai and Molokai, $115,225 for Molokai and $54,333 for Lanai. There's been over 1,400 applications that have come in for this assistance. We're partnering with MEO to do lots of outreach. The highest numbers we're getting is for Kihei, Lahaina, Kahului, and Wailuku. So people have been responding. We haven't noticed a real spike since the moratorium ended, for the eviction moratorium, but there was a slight increase. And right now, we're just trying to do a lot of outreach so people don't stop reaching out. Even more so now, we want them to reach out for help.
So just roundabout numbers, Tracey explained to us that they had to staff up and hire some mediators. Has Catholic Charities also had to increase some of its staffing to be able to do this outreach services as well as the anticipated mediations?
Yes, definitely. Well, when we started this venture of the rental assistance, we did have to hire up. Um, we were expecting a flood of people, so we did hire. We have staff statewide that are assisting the Maui applicants. So we encourage the use of all the websites that we have, one of which is the county and one of which is Catholic Charities. We also have a hotline and we have people here that can answer questions and help people move forward. So our intake specialist is very outgoing, very engaging. She is super kind to people and she treats folks like their friends and neighbors, which is really nice to hear because that's what they need sometimes.
So wonderful to hear that that's what you folks are doing. I'm going to leave one question for all of our guests here on the eviction moratorium. I'll start with you, Thelma, and then go to Tracey and then Troy. Thelma, what's your one main takeaway that you want our viewers to know about the eviction moratorium process?
Gosh, there's so many, but one of the things the intake specialist wanted me to say is that people who are applying for assistance that need more assistance, they need to recertify. They cannot just stop and assume that they're going to be helped. They need to ask about continuing assistance. So, if you qualify, you need ongoing help, don't just assume that it's going to be there. You have to touch base with the people you're working with to say, I need additional help because it is multi-month. You can be helped for multi-month for either rental assistance or utility assistance.
That's a great piece of advice. Tracey, one key takeaway for our audience.
So the takeaway is if you're a tenant and you receive a notice, contact the mediation center on the island where you reside right away. Remember, mediation is an opportunity for you to have a conversation with the help of a mediator, with your landlord, to work out an agreement that works for both you and your landlord. So please remember to contact your mediation center right away, or if they call you, respond to their call.
And Rep. Hashimoto, you get the last word on this.
Be proactive. I think we all have to be proactive during these times because I think we need to figure out a solution to move out of where we are at this point. There is a lot of federal rental assistance available, and there is a push to September 30th to get a lot of these funds out because we have to obligate 65% of these federal funds, or we possibly may have to give it back to the federal government. So we don't want that. We want to have that money stay in our Hawaii community. So if you feel like you qualify, make sure that you apply. On the neighbor islands, there is no wait. On Oahu, I know there is a limit. Each month they take 5,000 applications, but on the rest of the neighbor islands, there is no waiting time. So apply today and be proactive.
Be proactive. That's the number one piece of advice. So thank you to our guests, Rep. Hashimoto, Tracey Wiltgen of Mediation Center of the Pacific, and Thelma Akita-Kealoha for sharing their insights with us. As the pandemic conditions continue to evolve, we will be continuing to monitor what's happening in the courts and in the community. Turning to other news, interim appears to be a downtime at the Capitol, but there is a lot of work occurring at the Capitol and in the community. One of the things lawmakers look forward to are committee site visits, where we often take committee staff and members to visit with and talk with the key leaders and state employees working in the trenches, and generally follow up on the many questions lawmakers have. From May through July 2021, as pandemic restrictions were being lifted, many of our committees were able to get out to visit some key sites. This next video highlights just 3 of those sites.
So I worked in an older building. We moved out of the older building in 1996, and it remained vacant until we demolished it in 2016. And so it was pretty much it was the oldest building on, and there was no AC. And every summer we get those termites coming through, and we were like, oh my goodness, get out of here. But this building originally, Goddard building, was pretty much the hallway of Hawaii.
Yeah.
So this state hospital, they've gotten a lot of consulting services from like National Standard on what a safe facility would look like.
So we're really focused on decriminalizing mental illness as much as we can.
I was just wondering, because I had just asked him how close you folks were to using these for restoration projects, and I was wondering what your timeline was looking like.
The massive bank that USDA has for animals that's right next to the seed bank in Fort Collins. And so it's nice to have this tiny little bank for our coral.
So the fate of the corals is different depending on who they are, but some go back into the field, some stay here as guinea pigs, and some of them we are hoping to be able to put back out in the field with organic. The one on the left is really hot, the one on the right is really cold. And by doing so, we can control like long-term temperature profiles. And that's a really big step for us, a really big step for coral research in Hawaii and coral research in general, because we can replay these really long and realistic temperature profiles, right? So we can say in 2015, for example, there was really severe bleaching here. We want to recapitulate that in a tank and understand exactly what selective breeding we're doing.
construction technology has improved a lot since then. So that's another thing with regard to the new designs would incorporate one field technology. A lot of times fields
So from the Hawaii State Hospital to the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology on Coconut Island to Aloha Stadium, House committee members have been to all parts of Oahu to visit key projects and programs. With the increasing case counts, these committee site visits are scaling back, but hopefully members will be able to get out to more sites and other islands for this important follow-up work that we are not able to do during packed legislative sessions. Talking about important sites in each member's district, our public schools are some of the most important key community spots in our districts. With the start of the public school in early August, excitement and anxiety could be felt at all schools amongst students, teachers, staff, and parents as we move to almost 100% in-person learning. Today I have with me Chair Justin Woodson of the House Education Committee to share with me some of his insights on the start of the 2021 school year. Hi Justin, how you doing?
Hi Della, thank you for allowing me to be here with you today.
So what are some of the key highlights or key reports you're hearing about the start of the 2021 school year?
Sure, well there's quite a bit going on right now, and as you can imagine, this year has presented historic challenges because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there's challenges with regards to physical space in the classrooms, and I appreciate the efforts that incoming interim Superintendent Keith Hayashi has brought to the table and his team, but the legislature, particularly the House, is going to have to monitor all of these situations. And so with regards to the physical spacing, we know that in classrooms, as an example, the physical footprint of the class is not sufficient to account for that 6 feet of social distancing that we need in our classrooms. And so that's presenting challenges that we're going to have to keep a track of and also to monitor. We also know that in some of our, particularly elementary schools, they have these double desks, these desks that are attached together. That's how they come, that's how they're oriented. And with that kind of orientation in the classroom, obviously you're not going to be able to maintain that 6 feet of separation. And so these are things that we have to monitor to make sure that as the year progresses, we might have to make some significant adjustments. It's too early to see, but again, the House is monitoring some of these developments. Besides that, of course, you have issues with the masks themselves. So Della, you and I know that even in a normal setting with adults, right, adults don't always wear their mask, unfortunately. So similarly, that's what's happening at the schools. Teachers are doing the best that they can to make sure that they monitor and make sure kids are wearing their masks, but it's not always the case. And so again, something that we're keeping a close eye on as we move forward with this school year. And besides masks, we have issues with vaccinations. Our office is researching, and it seems like for the state of Hawaii, our public school teachers are about at an 80% vaccination rate. That is pretty strong. Having said that, when you look at the national average, it's upwards to 90%. And so we have some ways to grow, but we are in the right place. And so because the governor has issued a directive saying that all state employees must be vaccinated, this includes teachers. And so for those teachers, for whatever reason, that do not want to get their vaccinations, they're going to be required to test weekly. I am still concerned about that because with this new D variant, the transmissibility is greater and it's infecting people at a quicker rate. So whereas before it was 7 to 10 days, now we know that it's up to as little as 2 days. And so testing.
So if I interrupt there a little
Sure.
bit, I mean, one of the things that we did in the special session was we overrode the governor's veto of Senate Bill 811, and that was Act 4. So what was the significance of that? Because I think it's had a great significance in providing the community with information, if you can talk about that bill.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to provide a little bit of legislative history on that proposal. SB 811, or Act 4, as it's referred to now, simply articulates that the Department of Education is required to make sure that they report COVID cases per school. And so that's an important tool for families to have, because as these caseloads increase, we want to make sure that we provide families with the tools necessary to provide protection for their kids. And so the governor has the authority to veto proposals. And this year, the governor, he had the authority, and I respect that authority. He vetoed quite a bit of bills. This, again, was one of the bills. The legislature respectfully did not concur with that decision, and so we went ahead and overrode his veto. And just to put some perspective, it's no small feat to override a veto. It takes a supermajority of votes in both chambers, the House and the Senate. We were able to do that, and we had quite a bit of margin on this particular proposal because it was very important. And so what we were saying is we want families to have this extra tool to their disposal so they can make sure that they're protecting their families. And if you go to the Department of Education's website now, you look at the top, it'll say COVID updates. You will see a button that says Learn More. If you click on that button, you scroll down, it will list all the schools in alphabetical order. And so as a parent, if you are concerned, you can track to see how many cases are happening at your school. And if you are truly concerned, as you see cases rise, I hope that doesn't happen, but it's more than likely it will happen to some degree, then you can contact your principal and have them answer all your questions to make sure that you feel safe as your child goes back to school.
So we're both public school parents, and I will share with you,
Yes.
my daughter in the 6th grade, we got a notification today that someone on the school or affiliated with the school tested positive. And the information, no names are given, it's just kind of a notification. But what I appreciated was that there was that notification to parents. And then of course, if there's a closer contact, then the schools are doing that follow-up.
Yes.
But it's really important. I think for me, the other really important thing is that it shows potentially the community transmission in the community at large.
That's right.
Because as students get exposed in their family settings, they are going to come to school. But we're not really seeing transmission at the schools yet because it's too early. Is that an accurate characterization of the numbers at this point?
I would say it's accurate, defined as far as the ability that we have to see the reporting. Our office is monitoring to see if there's any lag time with the reporting in terms of what the schools are reporting and uploading to the website. We still have to ascertain if there is a lag time. And so again, it's early on, but we're monitoring all these situations.
And I think you bring up such an important point about the transmissibility of the Delta variant. And so, you were mentioning challenges with testing. Are you seeing any more opportunities for testing at the schools, or for free testing out in the community for our students and our parents in our school communities?
Yeah, absolutely, there are many opportunities for free testing. My main concern as it relates to testing is that if in fact, again, we're verifying this with CDC and the Department of Health, but if in fact the transmissibility is increased to where you can spread the virus after 2 days, then we're gonna have to take a serious look to see if we test not only once a week, but twice a week. And that's with regards to particularly our elementary schools, because they don't have the option of getting the vaccination. So if you're 11 or younger, then particularly for that class, that population of students, we want to make sure that they are protected.
So what do you think, as the numbers will likely creep up, is there discussion about offering more distance learning options, or what have you done thought about for those kinds of options? Because I know that the schools first started off with more of a preference of 100% in person.
Yes, that is very much the case. And so you as a parent or guardian should have received an option to continue with distance learning. And distance learning did not happen this time monolithically. It was very community specific. And so at some schools, the distance learning is actually offered per your child at that particular school. For other, you see areas to where complex areas, HUIDA, they aggregated their resources together, and they offer different types of distance learning opportunities for kids in that particular complex area. And yet for those that don't have what they defined as viable distance learning options, then the Department of Education system-wide has a distance learning platform set up to where anywhere you are in the state, you can take advantage of this distance learning opportunity. Now, unfortunately, we know that for most kids, the research is showing us that distance learning is not the optimal mode of educational delivery. And it's concerning because there is learning loss that's happening. 1 year, sometimes 1.5 years that we're seeing that's transpiring throughout the state and across the country and across the world. This is not unique to Hawaii. This is not unique to the United States. And so the Department of Education is putting together mechanisms to address that. We know within the constructs of the normal school day, there are things that you can do to make up that learning loss over time. When I say over time, I mean over several years. Other effective strategies include like offering very effective after-school programs, which the Department of Education is doing. Also, if you have robust summer school programs, that's another way, tried and true measure to actually make up those deficiencies as it relates to learning loss. And so we're going to have to see what happens. I am most concerned, however, about students that are in high school because they have a limited amount of time to make up that loss. So if you are a parent, I implore upon you to make sure that you check with your teacher to see where your child is at. And if they did suffer a learning loss because of the pandemic, because of distance learning, then work with your teacher to make sure that you develop a plan individually for your child so that they can catch up. Now, this is a lot, but on the inverse side, there's also a worrisome development, and that is there has been a precipitous drop in kindergarten going rates by about 14%. And so, like in many states, kindergarten is compulsory. In the state of Hawaii, statutorily it's articulated that you have to attend kindergarten if you are 5 by the time, if your birthday is July 31st or before, then and you're 5 years old, you should attend kindergarten. That's because it's developmentally appropriate for you to do so. It has a significant impact on your overall learning. And of course, the education community has known this for a long time, but now the broader community is also aware that there are tremendous benefits for a child attending pre-kindergarten. And so that's because, again, of the social cognitive development that happens, particularly in that time space. And so if you have a child that's not attending kindergarten and they also did not attend preschool, then that child is going to be fighting an uphill battle for the rest of their educational career as it relates to first grade through 12th grade. And so I implore, if you have a student that is just not going to school for whatever reason, and they're supposed to be in kindergarten, you need to put that child in some kind of structured educational setting so that they have a chance once they enter into first grade.
So that 14% decline is something that they have aggregated at the school levels at this point, and so they're very concerned. Yes. When those students come in next year, they will just be placed into first grade, and that really is the concern, right? They're going to have lost that entire year.
That's definitely the concern, and again, the larger concern is per that age bracket and how your mind develops. Those years are crucial, and so the impacts are going to be felt stronger than if you were to miss a year of 5th grade as an example. You're missing kindergarten, and that's a crucial time that your brain is developing, and it's going to set you back.
So I know there's been a lot of questions too about the federal funding going to the schools, but we're losing some time, so I really want to just ask you, it sounds like there's lots of programs that you're interested in following up on. A lot of this is going to require federal funding, so I'm sure that you guys are going to be on top of that issue. But what are some of the next steps for your education committee before the start of the next legislative session?
Sure, so we're not able to do site visits for obvious reasons, which we would typically do during this time. But because there are a lot of questions, all of us as representatives, we're getting a lot of questions from our community. Rightfully so, they're concerned. They want to see what's happening. And so we're going to be having, the Committee on Education is going to be having an informational briefing sometime probably in the first week of September next month. And that's to allow the department to give a status update as to some of these issues, where they are, how they're addressing these very challenging issues, and also for representatives to ask questions on behalf of their community. So I encourage everyone to tune in to that. There will be a public notice 2 or 3 days before, so that everyone is aware. And again, it's an opportunity to get information, because it is our responsibility as state legislators to make sure that we're providing that information to our community members so they can make informed decisions for themselves.
Thank you so much. And I think, you're absolutely right. People are so concerned about the schools, and, we're all looking. I feel like I'm one of those public school parents on Fridays, like looking at that website to see how many transmitted cases are reported at, or the positive cases reported at my child's school. So I really want to thank you, Chair Woodson, for joining us. We talked a little bit about testing locations and free testing locations. So if we could put up that slide for our audience regarding how to get and find testing locations near you. We know that the transmissibility of Delta is very great. So if you go to this website, testinglocations.alohasafe.org, you will find buttons where you can go, links where you can go on each island, and it takes you through multiple screens. We all know here on Oahu about the free testing sites at Aloha Stadium, but again, there's sites at all kinds of places, or partnerships with different pharmacies, and so there are places that are accessible for testing locations, especially because we know people are moving around. We have students in school, more private school students and university students will be going back. And so we are learning to live with this virus. I want to thank everyone for joining us for this special episode of Talk Story with House Majority. I want to also remind you, please visit us at High House Dems, our website and our social media accounts on Facebook and Instagram. Again, that's at High House Dems. And please mark down Tuesday, October 26th for the next episode of Talk Story with House Majority. If you have specific ideas or stories you'd like us to feature, email me at repbalati@capital.hawaii.gov. And I want to leave you with this final House public service announcement that we actually created for signing up for the Aloha Safe Alert app. You can do your part in making sure that contact tracing is happening within our community by signing up for this Aloha Safe Alert app. Until the next time, stay safe, wear your mask, social distance, wash your hands. We need to take care of each other. Aloha.
Aloha Safe Alert is the state of Hawaii's official COVID-19 exposure notification app. It is personalized, private, free, and simple.
Add your phone to the fight against COVID-19 and be notified if you have been exposed to the virus. Here's how it works.
Download the Aloha Safe Alert app from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and follow the on-screen setup instructions.
Devices running the Aloha Safe Alert app will anonymously ping each other and measure distance and duration of exposure through Bluetooth signal strength. Location, name, and other identifiable information will not be shared.
Aloha Safe Alert will notify you if you are exposed to someone who is diagnosed with COVID-19. You'll receive a notification if you were within 6 feet of a confirmed COVID-19 positive case for a minimum of 15 minutes within the past 14 days.
If you test positive for COVID-19, you will receive a text message from the Department of Health with a verification code to enter into the app to anonymously notify others about possible exposure.
Again, Aloha Safe Alert is private, free, and simple. The more Hawaii residents and visitors volunteer to use the app, the better chance we have to control the virus. Let's join together to fight COVID as a community.